have some white South Africans or Afrikaans refugees going to the US.
Refugee of what? Your life is incredible. What are you talking about?
There is a white genocide in South Africa.
White South Africans see themselves as the victims. It just doesn't make sense.
You as a South African know very well the situation on the ground. Can you tell me what's your feeling from your point of view?
This white South African refugee story is the dumbest I've ever heard. So this didn't start now. Right back in 2016, during Trump's first presidency, a bunch of white South Africans went to the White House and had a meeting with Trump. And they basically said, hey, we are being systematically targeted by this black population because of our ethnicity, and we are experiencing a genocide. And Trump put out some tweets right back then. But today, he's taking the most drastic actions. Trump announced that they would be welcoming white South Africans as refugees escaping this white genocide that's allegedly taking place in South Africa. So let's look at what's actually happening. We have to start with history, right? South Africa in 1913, I'm going to take you back a little bit, had something called the Native Land Act. In 1913, if you were black in South Africa, you were removed of all of your land, and it gets worse. You were later also removed of your nationality. You were no longer, you were a black South African, and they're like, hey, you're not South African anymore. And all of that was given to white people. All the land was stolen from a population of 50 million people and given to white people. Now let's jump forward to 1994. South Africa celebrates democracy. Nelson Mandela is free, the first black South African elected president. And it's the most exciting thing ever, right? While black South Africans got their right to vote and their freedom to go to the same schools potentially and to walk on the same sidewalks and all these incredibly evil measures that apartheid had maintained, what they didn't get back was the land. So today, in 2025, white people in South Africa make up less than 20% of the population, but they own more than 80% of the land. A tiny minority of white people own the vast majority of the country. I'm talking farms. I'm talking mining. I'm talking about a black native population that for the most part are squatting in their own land. They don't even own the land below their feet. They're squatting, often illegally. Often the police and authorities come and say, you don't live here. You got to move on. They have nowhere to go. And it's this impossible situation where you're like, okay, well, what do you do where 80% of the country is owned by white people and they make up 20% of the population? Do you buy that land back? It would be, no country in the world could afford to do that, to buy back 80% of their country. Do you take that land back? It would scare away foreign investors. They'd be like, oh my God, South Africa is nationalizing just like Zimbabwe did under Robert Mugabe, right? So you can't take it back and you can't buy it back. So there's been a process of like basically willing buyer, willing seller, where the government are trying in part to redistribute wealth to black South Africans through the process of trying to buy it back. So that's the first thing to understand.
Sounds very genocidal to me.
Yeah, it's madness to call this a genocide. What genocide where you own the entire country? And like, you know, there are still today, if I'm in Cape Town and many parts of South Africa, there are still many restaurants and coffee shops and clubs that I'll go to where I'm the only person of color who's not working there. There is still a slave-master relationship where white people control that economy so tightly and are so affluent and are so privileged for the most part. Okay, so there's this huge, that just sets the scene to say, like, yeah, what refugee of what? Your life is incredible. What are you talking about? The second bit is then, these white farmers are showing images to Trump and to those that care to listen and saying, look at these images. And these images are horrific, right? They show farm murders. People that are getting attacked on these properties. And they're saying, we are being attacked because we are white. There's a few things to say there. One, when you look at the statistics, when you look at the actual numbers in South Africa, according to official reports from the police, firstly, white people are not disproportionately impacted by violent crime. In fact, black South Africans experience the most murders. So there's not this disconnect where like white people are disproportionately getting murdered more than anybody else as a percentage. It's just not true. What is the case is they often have these massive plots of land. They often live on these farm properties with their wine farms and all this luxury. And they are often very easy targets in a very, very unequal society where the poor are incredibly poor, the wealthy are incredibly wealthy, and you've got these really rich pockets of people. Also, when you look at a lot of these farm murders, which again are horrific, I know, I was a journalist, I went out to some of these farm scenes, I saw the dead bodies. When you look at some of these murders, you often see that it very often emanated from a dispute between owner of a farm and a staff member, right? But this is not the story that's being fed. The story that's being told is like there's this white community that are fighting for their lives, that are defending themselves from a black population that want blood. The thing is, South Africa is actually the complete opposite story. That's the saddest part about this whole thing. When South Africa won its democracy in '94, the whole international media flew to South Africa. All the media organizations expecting a bloodbath. They were expecting a black population that had been subjugated for over, 100 years to uprise and violently chuck out the Europeans, like in Mozambique, where Portuguese were chucked out basically in 48 hours, or they were expecting a civil war. And neither of those things happened. South Africa is a global example of what Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu called the Rainbow Nation, of peaceful coexistence, of forgiveness. South Africa had truth and reconciliation committees where white people who were responsible for apartheid and had committed sometimes awful crimes could share their truth and be forgiven. And the country moved on. And it's just really sad to see a country that has been so patient and so kind. And to be honest, the black population have tolerated so much, right? To go this many years where they still don't own their own country. And then to be told, oh, you're the genocidal one. You're the one. It's just not true. And it really just stems from a white superiority complex. It is this group of, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, who have this victim mentality. The annoying part is in South Africa is white South Africans see themselves as the victims. And if you visit there and see the lives that they live, it just doesn't make sense. One of the other ways they view themselves as victims is white South Africans often hate what's called affirmative action and black economic empowerment, or BEE. So this is the idea that because it is the most unequal country on earth, statistically, as in the difference between the rich and the poor is bigger than anywhere in the world. Yeah, it's huge. Measures are taken to help black South Africans economically catch up. So how do you give black South Africans an opportunity to get university positions if all of the white kids have the best private education and will take up all those positions? Well, what you do is you say, hey, a black South African kid from a marginalized background, from a really difficult school, maybe they need a B to get into the university, and the white South African kid needs an A. Now, you can imagine why white South Africans are so upset by this. They see it as reverse racism. If a kid is, 18 years old today, white South African, they say, I didn't create apartheid. I wasn't part of that system. I wasn't bad to black South Africans. So why am I being punished for historical injustices? They think it's reverse racism, that now I'm being discriminated against. And I think there is such a thing as positive discrimination. Positive discrimination says, hey, this country is incredibly unbalanced. White people are incredibly rich and black people are incredibly poor through no fault of their own because they've been over for decades. And if we don't create systems to help them catch up, you will forever be their masters. White people will forever own this country. So I do understand the white South African perspective of young people that feel like the odds are not stacked in their favor today, but they're also the ones that are still taking gap years and going on holiday to Thailand. So like they think their lives are but the actual population of South Africa have got far worse existence.
This might actually bring some light into the topic, the same as now people know more about Palestine. This crazy white refugee situation may bring some light onto what's going on there. To be honest, I'm excited to see these racists. Like, if they really believe that the odds are not in their favor and that they are the victims,
they're not a healthy contribution to South African society. They can go. That's fine.
Are they even going to be happy in the US?
Well, the funniest thing about that is you now get these white South African refugees that have arrived in the US. And the media have started going into these people's social media accounts and finding the most vile shit. I mean, like, there was one that arrived and he had, like, a history of the most anti-Semitic posts on his social media. So it's funny. The America appeared to be bringing the very bottom of the pit of South African society, but it's fine. They'll fit just in and right in the kind of deep south.